We'll call the the Planning and Parks Committee meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Here.
Here.
Present.
Here. Here. And our next order of business is approval of the minutes. Do I hear a motion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Minutes are approved. And the next portion of our program is public input. Is any speaker cards? No? The next matter is action items, and the first one, we're going to go to Parks and Matters first, correct? Okay. So I need a motion to move up the accounting of the city donated funds to Pond Athletic Association to the beginning of the agenda.
Okay.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstained? Motion passes. Mr. Vunich.
Aye.
So we are back to planning matters, and there are two items for consideration. The first one is commercial vehicle definition and traffic code.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair and members of the committee, this particular item is on tonight's agenda via the City Council and a recommendation from City Council that the Planning and Parks Committee explore this matter in more detail and then ultimately provide a recommendation back to the full City Council. As is referenced in the department's memorandum on this particular item, The zoning ordinance of the city of Wildwood defines commercial vehicles for the purposes of the zoning of property, the allowances that can occur on property based upon the zoning, and other items. There is also a traffic code. The traffic code is enforced more so than anything by the St. Louis County Police Department Wildwood Precinct. The traffic code also has provisions relating to commercial vehicles and their parking or storage in public right-of-ways. The two do have some overlap, and that was the issue that ultimately brought the question to the Board of Public Safety. The Board of Public Safety, as you know, as City Council members, oversees many of the issues relating to stop signs, other signage for safety purposes, and in instances like this, conflicts between codes that are administered by the police department and those that are administered by the Department of Planning. The Board of Public Safety did hear a recommendation from the Department of Planning, which was also supported by the St. Louis County Police Department Wildwood Precinct, and voted unanimously to change the definition in the traffic code to mirror that of the zoning ordinance of the city of Wildwood. That report was the subject of the January 13th City Council meeting and discussion that followed. At that meeting, many of the City Council members identified a potential issue that had also been discussed by the Board of Public Safety, and that is with the definition from the zoning ordinance of commercial vehicle, many independent contractors or others that work for companies that provide company vehicles or cars could be impacted by the change. That being again that the zoning ordinance definition requires commercial vehicles to either be in an enclosed structure or so as identified that you cannot identify it as a commercial vehicle, meaning if it has writing on it of a business or similar entity, that writing needs to be covered up if it is outside and not in an enclosed structure. That particular issue is what ultimately led the City Council to forward this matter to the committee for consideration. The department recognizes that all of our regulations at some level create a hardship on a certain sector of the population. Certainly, people that own property in a 3-acre area might believe it's better to be developed with quarter-acre lots, not just one at a density of 1 unit per 3 acres. And in this instance, the department recognizes that having a definition that requires certain vehicles to be either parked inside a garage or in an enclosure or so treated that they are not identifiable as a commercial type vehicle in a residential setting. However, the department does receive a number of calls each and every month about commercial vehicles. Those calls come from trustees of subdivisions and neighbors and express concerns about how that particular commercial vehicle looks in the neighborhood or the problems associated with it when it's parked either in the street or in the driveway. The department is still recommending the report that was prepared by the Board of Public Safety. It believes that in this particular instance, the greater good is preserving the integrity of the residential setting and not to the benefit of an individual or two that may reside in that residential setting. It's not that the department is heartless and doesn't understand the problem, but we're not saying that they can't have the vehicle in a residential setting. It just cannot be visible as a commercial vehicle either through placing it in a garage enclosure or so detailing it so that the commercial markings are not visible. So from that perspective, the department is presenting the Board of Public Safety report and endorsing that report once again tonight. Madam Chair, the department's available for any comments or questions, and certainly I know there will be some discussion that follows, so thank you.
So it's more on the discussion. I think that I spoke strongly at council regarding the matter just from the feedback that I've gotten from the local residents in Ward 7 and some other individuals that reside here that depend on that work truck or that work car that just has markings as defined underneath the code would be considered a commercial vehicle as the code is written. I think talking to some other council members and evaluating what we can and can't do, I think that other cities have kind of written a different type of code that defines a commercial vehicle by the visual aspect of it, like a tow truck, a 18-wheeler, a trailer, those big pieces of equipment. But the F-150 truck that has JC, Johnson Controls on it, and it's a very small logo, that is a commercial vehicle. But that's that individual's work truck. And a lot of people don't, I guess, maintain a normal car because they get the benefits of that truck. So it gives more money to their household, to have this benefit of this work truck, and they can use it for whenever they want. So I see the pros, I see the cons, but I think that there's some middle ground that we can maybe work with our residents to help define that a little bit more. I guess I'll question the council or this committee is look at the Mary Kay car. It's pink. I have a couple in my neighborhood, and it says Mary Kay on the back. That's a commercial car. So are we saying that owner's car that they won, can they not park that outside of their house? I mean, it's very small, but it's a Mary Kay advertisement. We know that's a Mary Kay car. The State Farm rep that has a simple little logo. I mean, I've seen them big and I've seen them small. I've seen them wrapped. I've seen them not. Like, where do you draw the line? But I think that the Molly Maids, what's different from a bumper sticker? I think that there's some room here that we can maybe allow something where I think the code, and Joe, please clarify this, and I think what I understood is that the code written now is you could park it on the street, but you couldn't park it in your driveway. So that was kind of the merging problem here, and that was the workaround. But I think that we have it backwards. I think we can protect the street for the safety aspect and blinding and things like that, but you're parking it on your own property, and I'm talking the smaller cars, something that's not this monstrous tow truck. I'd like for discussion to kind of see if we can maybe work something that's compatible for all. So I'd like to open the floor and get your thoughts and see where we can kind of meet in the middle here. So
I tend to agree with you, Councilmember McCune, that in areas within my ward, there are individuals that have cars that have a wraparound on them, or there's trucks that are, they're pickup trucks, but it's owned by a painter who has a rack on the back, and so it won't fit in the garage in his house. But he doesn't have any blaring signs on it. He doesn't have any equipment that's so high, is even above the cab itself. He goes and picks up that equipment and gets it when he has to go out to do his job. So if there's some way we could come up with how we define those differences from a Laclede gas truck being parked in somebody's driveway or on the road, or a panel truck being parked at someone's property. The individual that has the Thai restaurant that has a panel truck that he drives around, he does not park that in his driveway because he knows that's against code. And he doesn't park it on his street either. So I think I very much agree we need to look at how we can adjust this to allow for those individuals making a livelihood that represent employed individuals within our city, make it easier for them not to get cited for things, but we need to also make it understood that things do not sit in the street that are going to impede safety access. And I don't know how we go about defining that other than we start getting very specific about the size and type of vehicles that can go in both places, on the driveway, in the street, in the garage.
Councilmember Rennie.
I totally agree with both of you guys. I think I think we have it backwards. I think the problem is that these cars and trucks are being parked in the parking lot over here at Deerberg's or at Schnucks, or they're being parked on roadways, and I think that's the problem that we should fix. But we should allow people to park their vehicle on their own property. Within limits. I think Ford F-150 weighs up to about 6,000 pounds. I think that it's not unreasonable to think if you've got a Ford 250 or something like that, it's not still a tow truck. So under 10,000 pounds may be more realistic. But I think that's, I don't personally have a problem with that. I've not heard anyone really have a major problem with that. I think it's unfortunate. I mean, I'm happy and sad that this came to us from, I think, an inappropriate way a citizen was treated. But I think in the end that there may be some good for that'll come from this, that'll allow folks to actually park their trucks on their own property that they paid for.
Councilmember Bartoli.
Thank you. Joe, first of all, I know that you're not Heartless, or the department's not Heartless.
Thank you.
Yeah. So is it the residential zoning code now that has the 12,000 pound limit? Or is that the traffic code?
Traffic code.
That's the traffic code. Okay. So where did that come from? Where did the 12,000 pounds come from?
St. Louis County.
Okay, so we're pretty much in line with St. Louis County, which we are on a lot of our ordinances and codes.
Particularly in the area of the criminal and traffic codes. We almost mirror St. Louis County since the inception of the city.
So this would be a little bit abnormal to our regular behavior to go away from like their code that they have currently.
We've done it on certain occasions. As you know, we're looking at a domestic violence change. Yep. We've looked at hunting and firearm regulations. We do it a little differently because Wildwood is different. We have large tracts of land, more rural area than most other cities that either contract with St. Louis County or even to a certain degree unincorporated county.
Okay. So I'm going to kind of echo what we've already heard. And I mean, I got a problem with this, and mine might be a little bit more than most people's. The driveway street thing, I always when I first heard that, I actually thought we had it backwards. I actually thought I heard it wrong. So I think we do have it wrong. It is your property. That I don't think you can be able to park an 18-wheeler in your driveway, but I don't think we have an 18-wheeler in a residential area either. And we do have things about a specific size. That's the 12,000 pounds. So we do have that. But, I mean, my thoughts are a lot what people have said about small businesses. The guy has a truck that, you're going to have somebody that might not like it, but they're going to ask that guy to fix a gutter that just came loose in their subdivision without having to call somebody like, hey, Ken, can you help me out with this thing? So that guy might not be getting liked about what he has in his driveway and everything, but he's also kind of a go-to guy a lot of things. But there's a lot of those small businesses that, small businesses will continue to tell you they don't look for help from government and municipalities. They just say, stay out of my way and don't make it a hindrance for me. And I think that this is going to do that. And, the guy might not be able to pull, I didn't think of the painting truck with a rack, but yeah, he might not be able to pull that into his driveway. Or into his garage, excuse me. Yes, thank you. The utilities, I don't know. I have no idea how many people that live in Wildwood work for Spire or Ameren now, but if you tell them they can't, they might, if you tell them that they're going to have to now wake up an hour early, drive downtown to pick up their vehicle, and then at 5 or 6 o'clock at night and drive back downtown to drop off that vehicle because you can't live in here, and they've been doing this for 5, 10, 20 years, they're going to be irate. And that is not a benefit for Ameren. That is a benefit for that employee. And I think that is going to be, we're going to wake some people up that have never, ever known that, couldn't find City Hall, and they're going to find it. So I think that you're hurting those people as well. Another thing I thought of, and you're kind of talking about identifying a commercial vehicle, Would dealer plates be considered a commercial vehicle?
We haven't interpreted it as such.
Okay, but I mean, that's not a personal car.
The dealer plates are heavily regulated by the Department of Motor Vehicles. And so from that perspective, they can't stay on a car for an extended period of time, at least a personal vehicle, so to speak. So we don't interpret it as such.
Okay, but it's just, I mean, you could see where, I can see where it would be a little fuzzy, maybe, but, I mean, I wouldn't want us to do that, but, I mean, I get a lot of phone calls about a lot of weird things, there's, the lights out, can you help us here? The trash truck ran over the curb and knocked it loose at the cul-de-sac. In 3 years plus, I have never got a call about a commercial vehicle parked. I mean, you will get people that, they don't like necessarily what somebody's doing, but I have never, ever got a call. And I know you have. I'm not questioning that you have or have not, but I think that we have an isolated case of somebody that was mistreated and is finding an avenue to kind of get even. And I don't think that is what we're here to do. So I personally have no problem leaving this as it is. And unless I am unaware of issues and incidents that are out there, I have no problem leaving this the way it is right now.
Ken?
Actually, I actually do have a problem leaving it the way it is, and not only because I actually think, for instance, this index case, for instance, is a person who just moved into Wildwood with their young baby, who had a truck for work, exactly the same circumstances, and they attempted to park it on their own driveway and were harassed. And I think that homeowners associations could certainly give some insight for their own subdivision and develop a policy perhaps that could include petitioning to allow individuals to have a permit within the subdivision to have something on their driveway, perhaps. But, I actually would be fine restricting commercial vehicles from parking on the streets and the roadways and everything. But exactly like Councilmember McCune said, allowing this to happen on your own driveway. And that's, I think, the biggest problem is people can't park it on their own driveway. They're not going to, as you say, they're not going to park, if we keep the weight limit involved, then they're not going to put tow trucks on their front lawn. They're not going to do any of those things. They're just going to use commercial cars, SUVs, and maybe a smaller size pickup truck. But to me, as long as that's, not a major issue for the subdivision, I certainly don't have a problem with it.
Crystal?
So I'm in favor of switching it, like let it park on your property and not street. So the subdivision, yes, Lake Chesterfield is fairly large. We get complaints all the time about commercial vehicles, not clear. The subdivision has a hard time asserting and defining what is a commercial vehicle. So we push it to the city to say, okay, you guys be the heavy, and you guys define it a little bit better than what our indentures did, and that's a big process to get that changed. So it's well defined for the city. So a lot of people just call the city directly, and I know that you've probably received a lot there. Mm-hmm. But what my point is that we can put other parameters in here, like dually trucks. If it's right on that 12,000 thing, you can say no dually trucks, because that's well visually defined. The other thing that may be restricted to one commercial vehicle, so we don't have a business parking lot in a driveway. I think that we can really brainstorm different things as we go and point out what makes sense. I think the dealer plate was a good observation, because that is their commercial car. They just would swap out, and every 30 days they can get a new car and put a new dealer plate on, and then it resets the time with St. Louis County. They can't cite you on it. So again, I think that was an interesting statement, but yes, there's other rules for that. So I think that what I don't like is that you say cover up the decal. Well, that looks trashier, I think. We can allow tarps. That looks trashy than some of the commercial vehicles if you put a tarp over there, but that's allowed. Am I right? A tarp?
Yes, ma'am.
So I think the aesthetics would look pretty bad with that. And a lot of the garages, like you pointed out, like I know mine can't fit an F-150 truck and it's too shallow. And they just made the trucks a lot bigger from when my house was built. So, I mean, that's with nothing on it. So I think that I would like for this to continue a good discussion. I don't think that we can really move forward at this point in time. Based on our discussion, I think we're all in the same understanding of what we're trying to do here. But again, it's going to take a little bit of work to further define this and maybe look at other cities that have the same municipal codes and see how they define it and see what their problems or issues that they've had and go from there. Because we can always amend it, right? Mm-hmm. So once we make one, and if we find that we forgot something or we need to add or take away, we can always amend that as we go. So it's a learning.
Yes, certainly the department can do some additional research, identify other communities of similar characteristics as Wildwood, see what they do or don't do, and then provide you with some options that you can consider.
Okay.
Done.
Thank you.
Well, and I stand corrected. The part I was okay with was just leaving this 12,000 pound and being able to do that. I agree with the driveway part. I think that we should be able to park our vehicles in our own driveway. So as far as like the cover up part of it, or even the sites that, even the guy, the one man show that has the magnetic decal on the side of his car, and he comes home and it's late like it is now and it's raining outside and he's on the phone and he walks inside and he forgets to pull it off. I mean, that's just, that's just a busy man, and I don't want to, like get him in trouble for that. Something that Councilmember Remy just brought up, because they are identified by a decal, would Uber and Lyft be included in commercial vehicles?
If they had their light on and had it parked in their driveway or on the street, yes,
but
under
like
the zoning ordinance.
Just the decal? Because they have a decal on their window? A lot of them. I don't know all of them, but yeah. So, I mean, it can be identified. The part about no more than one commercial vehicle, I'd be a little cautious there. I think the majority of households today are, there's two working people in the house. They could each have a commercial vehicle. So it might be something to maybe no more than two, because it could actually be a husband and wife working for the same company. If they both work for, if they both work for the maid service or whatever there is. So I think we just need to be cautious about that and not penalize one or the other. So, I mean, since we do have, I guess, a lot of questions to be answered and a lot of thinking to be done, I mean, would it be okay? Would it be appropriate to make a motion to postpone, or what do you think, Joe?
Yes, sir. I think a motion to postpone and let the department, do some additional research and bring back some options that address your statements and concerns.
Okay, I'll make that motion then, Debbie. And okay.
Do I second?
I'll second with a comment.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
So if you have a pickup truck without a logo that you use for work, you can park that in your driveway, but if there's a logo on it, then you cannot?
Typically, we do not get calls on those, nor do we enforce it. So if it's not, if the pickup truck does not have any markings, decals, etc., then for the most part, if it just has the front license plate and not the rear, we don't enforce it. Because in those instances, it's not creating a problem for, let's say, the aesthetics, the visual.
Thank you. Katie?
I just real quickly wanted to ask, real quickly wanted to ask if we can put a definitive time on when we can get feedback from the department, number one, and then number two, would you be looking at cities, say like Eureka or possibly Wentzville, or where there's rural areas incorporated with their more traditional high-density areas?
Yes, I'd try to find communities that mirror some of our characteristics so that there's more applicability. Doing
Okay.
something from the city of St. Louis obviously wouldn't be applicable
No.
because, again, it's very different. But I think of locations like maybe Edwardsville, which is a growing community that's absorbing agricultural property as they grow, so that there's that, I think, that same kind of situation
Yeah, same
potentially.
type of situation, yeah.
Crystal?
To add to the motion, Joe, I know this might be a lot, but maybe you can pass it on to Captain Mundell. Can you see how many citations or warnings and how many calls they have received? Let's say, I don't know, I'll look to you guys. How long do you want to look back?
6 months.
I'd say a year. A year's time for anything within the city of Wildwood. And I'd like to know if a citation or a warning was issued, so we can just kind of understand the volume. And if you, as the city staff, have a log or information that just rested with you and you sent code enforcement out, and there was a ticket issued from code enforcement, if you can include that data as well. We'd like to just see what the volumes we're dealing with. Is that too much to ask, Joe?
No, not at all.
Okay. So if you guys are okay with adding that to the motion, I don't know if we need
We'd have to amend the motion.
amend it. Do we need to amend it based on the to-do tasks?
Those are just details on the task.
Yeah, I think if the maker and the second are acceptable to the addition, we don't need to do an amended motion first.
Okay, just want to make sure we do it right. Okay,
Ken?
thank you.
I don't want to be in the minority because I don't want to slow down what we're talking about. But my only question or concern would be, and maybe this is bold, but do we really need to look at other city municipalities? Can't we just come up with our own sensible policy that we think works well here? And if we suspect that we don't actually want commercial vehicles to park on the streets, then maybe it's not a good idea. But if we think that it's acceptable to have some parameters to park in your driveway, I guess I don't really care what they do in Eureka or Brentwood, because in the end it doesn't really inform me. Just my 2 cents.
Good point.
It's a lot of extra work that you all have to do, perhaps, but in essence, for me,
Based upon what I've heard from the committee members, I believe the department could probably write something without too much research that would accommodate what you've described. And that certain vehicles of a certain size would be acceptable in on private property within a residential setting.
Any other comments?
Would we expect that back at our next meeting, or?
I'll do my very best. If I come up with, in the next couple of weeks where I don't make a lot of progress, I'll give you a forewarning. It may be bumped to May. But during that period of time, we'll be sensitive to any complaints we get as we move in a direction that's probably going to make it a little easier than harder.
Gary, will you restate the motion, please?
Motion to postpone discussion on commercial vehicles until there's further research. Further research to include checking the police department on service or some
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstained? Motion passes. Our next item is municipal enforcement of code violations. Mr. Vunich.
Thank you again, ma'am. Madam Chair and members of the committee, as you know, at last night's meeting, a gentleman named Andy Irvine attended and spoke during public participation about certain frustrations relating to a neighboring property and the lack of success, in his opinion, the city's had in addressing municipal code violations. And this was prepared in advance of Mr. Irvine's comments last night, although, as you know from Mr. Irvine's comments during public participation, this has been an ongoing issue for him. And certainly there are other locations in the city of Wildwood where municipal code enforcement doesn't always achieve the outcome that neighboring property owners seek, nor does the person that's being contacted by the city about the violation feel that we're being as fair as we could be, or certainly as reasonable as necessary or as they would like. Tonight, I just want to give you an explanation of how we do things so that when you do get comments or when you do hear things, there's at least some balance to what's being provided to you. For the most part, there's really two enforcement arms in the city of Wildwood. One, obviously, is the St. Louis County Police Department Wildwood Precinct. We very, very seldom use them for any type of municipal type violations relating to zoning, grading, tree preservation, or subdivision. They, for the most part, are only utilized when there is a true problem property, where someone is at risk due primarily to their own behavior toward themselves. And in instances like that, the problem properties unit is a key component in addressing that for the safety of that individual and for the betterment of the community. We do have some hoarders, and they do inevitably create problems for themselves that need to be addressed if possible for their own safety and health. The second entity or arm is the Department of Planning and its code enforcement responsibilities. There are two code enforcement officers. They are divided into two primary responsibilities. One does zoning and nuisance code violations. The other does grading, stormwater erosion, tree preservation, etc. And as you know, with the size of Wildwood and the development level, even in some of the rural areas, they are both very busy at times doing those assignments as well. So the first item I'd just like to mention is that with the limitations we have on staffing, there are times that there are 3 code enforcement officers, one of those 3 being me. And so if we don't get the things right away, it's not because we're ignoring them, nor are we necessarily not assessing them as a priority or in terms of importance. It's just a matter of you have to go through the list, and sometimes certain activities require immediate action. If we get a call that someone's clearing land, obviously we go there first, because if they remove trees, we can't put those trees back. If somebody leaves their trash can out in the front of their house, that's not at the same importance or level of attention that we take. So there's 2 entities. We do our best to coordinate between the 2, but certainly for all intents and purposes, we depend on 2 code enforcement officers and the director of planning at times to enforce our codes as best we can. It's never easy. Obviously, you're dealing with residents on both sides. The resident that is being questioned about certain activity, and oftentimes the resident or residents that have contacted the city because of that behavior or condition on the property. And we want to try to walk that fine line and be professional to both. But obviously the codes are what we apply, and the codes are typically blind, meaning that they don't care if you're a resident or not. If you're doing something wrong, then you shouldn't be doing it. And that's kind of how we approach it. All in all, our residents are very reasonable when contacted. It's very seldom that we don't immediately gain compliance. And that's part of the issue with Mr. Irvine. The code enforcement staff did go out there. In fact, I had them visit the property regularly every week for the period of about 6 months. And when there was a problem, the owner of the property was contacted and compliance was gained. It was temporary compliance, and we kind of start the cycle over again, which is not atypical. It's not frequent, fortunately, but it's not atypical. And so from that perspective, we do try to respect our residents, treat them as we would hope to be treated if we were in the opposite side of the situation, and certainly listen to their stories. And when there is a compliance issue and it needs to be addressed, we give them ample time. We don't expect miracles overnight, and certainly that's key amongst our process. Of late, though, even the level of enforcement is becoming much more difficult. And it started in 2014 with the unrest in Ferguson, the review of the municipal court system in St. Louis County by the state legislature, and then the rules that were promulgated and handed down by the Missouri Supreme Court. What that means is that some of our tools are no longer as effective as they were, meaning that the fine structure has been substantially reduced, and that fine structure is a key component. If at all, most people listen when you tell them it's at a certain level, and it used to be up to $1,000 per day based upon the municipal judge and his assessment and action. Nowadays, that's not the case. And for the most part, reoccurring violations we cannot cite on a day-to-day basis. And repeat offenders typically are not cited as much as they were in the past. So what we're seeing is that there is a certain group of people that are taking advantage of the new system, and those are the ones we struggle with most. And those are the ones I apologize to you all when you get complaints about, because certainly we're doing the best we can. Also in this new landscape, we have less access to property. In fact, if we typically can't see it from the road, we shouldn't be on the property unless we have an administrative search warrant, which has to be issued by a prosecuting attorney or the court. And so the process slows down dramatically, and certainly there's a great deal more paperwork involved. The coordination of enforcement efforts have gotten a little bit more difficult. The police department now is under much, much more scrutiny than in the past. Not that they were doing anything wrong, but their point is that when they arrive at a scene, it usually escalates pretty quickly, just in terms of the heartbeat, the adrenaline, it's just, and we try now not to use them as limited as possible. And then finally, the time frames. In past, a simple violation, we could give 48 hours. You have 48 hours to cut your grass. If it's the weekend, great, do it on the weekend when you're home. Now we have to give up to 10 days in most instances based upon state legislature. So the time frames and the frustration of certain people rise just because we have to follow the rules, which we will do. So tonight, as I say in the memorandum, I think in trying to be responsive to our residents and certainly enforce the codes as you've charged us to as city council and our elected officials for the city of Wildwood, we have a few suggestions that we'd like to place before you just so you can see what we're doing. And hopefully, if you have issues with them, identify those so we don't proceed forward or we modify it before proceeding forward. The first is that we do still want to use problem properties unit of St. Louis County. And if you're not familiar, problem properties unit is usually a team of 3 individuals. It's a police officer, usually not dressed as a typical police officer, but maybe. The second is a building inspector from St. Louis County Department of Public Works. And then the third is a social worker. And that team goes to these truly problem properties and works with the individual, because in these instances, it's just not that they're lazy. There may be some underlying causes that need to be addressed so that we can make the situation better for the individual as well as the area. The second is when we do have repeat offenders, we hope that you'll understand if we ask for maximum fines, because these are the individuals that bring their property or their issue into compliance and then several days later start it all over again, knowing that it takes months, so why not? And the best approach to that is to not give much latitude when the fine is discussed. And we typically know that that's a problem for some, but if we're going to be effective in maintaining the quality of life in Wildwood and property values, sometimes that's what we have to do. And we'd like to, again, just like tonight, emphasize the importance of code enforcement and cooperation at all levels of government. And I don't mean this disrespectfully, but oftentimes when you review the judge and the prosecuting attorney, they stand here and talk about all of the fines that they've levied for speeding, DWI, DUI, but very, very seldom. In fact, not recently in my memory have they ever talked about code enforcement. And to me, if there's a problem property in a neighborhood, it can basically start a real issue in that neighborhood if not addressed effectively. And so what I guess I'm saying is it's a coordinated effort, and people have to prioritize it. Keeping our roads safe, keeping people that are under the influence off of them is certainly a high priority. But if there is a problem property where there's things going on in that house, in a subdivision, and many of you probably know some from either past experience or hopefully not recent experience, we certainly like to have that coordinated effort. We don't need 3 ships or 3 boats on the lake. The police, the prosecuting attorney in municipal court, and the Department of Planning. We all need to be in the same boat on the same lake. And then finally, if we have opportunities, we'd like to lobby the state legislature through our municipal organizations to kind of rethink what they've done to the municipal court structure. It needed repair. I will never stand before you and say it didn't, but I think the pendulum went a little too far the other way. And so if the Missouri Municipal League or the St. Louis County Municipal League ever have opportunities, certainly if we have the opportunity to participate through a letter or support, I would hope that we could bring that to the committee and it would review it, but certainly supportive if reasonable. And those are the things that we'd like to identify tonight for you, hear your thoughts on it, and certainly any suggestions you might have as well. It's not easy. You get the brunt of it as much as us as being elected officials. So we want to hear from you as well. So thank you.
There's a lot of red tape. That's what I'm hearing. And process and time and procedures, and I see how it resets the clocks. But what we see and what Mr. Irvine sees, it doesn't look like there's progress.
Yeah.
Because my takeaway last night, it seemed like we weren't doing enough based on his comments, but we couldn't rebuke what he was saying. So I guess my first question that came to mind and I see is the workloads of your department and pulling back from using St. Louis County Police, which we contract with. So the first thing is, what if we would increase staff, because it is a service to our residents. It is a great concern. Maybe we could respond quickly and maybe have somebody dedicated more to do the administrative process, work with the courts, start coordinating and logistically trying to oil a wheel that we can maybe roll a little bit simpler down the hill to get it going, and not use you as a resource because you have so much on your plate, and you have 2 code enforcement officers. So I think that with the increased need, I know Lake Chesterfield alone bugs the crap out of you guys. We are an older community in Wildwood, and we're hitting the 30-year mark where houses are starting to fall apart and people are not taking care of them. And we have the issues that are coming up nonstop. So I guess my question would be, would increased staffing in your department help based on the safety and hazards that we see and the property values? I know that it's important where I live. I want the property values to maintain. If I have the house next to me that is violating all the codes and aesthetics and hazards, which we do have, that's our number one thing in Wildwood, is to make sure that we keep our city beautiful and we keep these property values up. We want people to move here and not say that we don't take care of our city. So, and the last comment I had is I really like your number 4 option. I know that Councilmember Garitano is with the Municipal League. So, and I know that several others on the council are with them. So that might be a good discussion to work with those council members to bring that up at the Municipal League for sure. So I think that would be a priority that can kind of run on its own. But again, I think I would like to hear your comments if you think that would help you on staffing.
Well, certainly as Wildwood grows, so does the calls for service relating to code enforcement and all other types of activities. I think it'd be a great conversation to have in 2021 or 2022. The reason I say that is obviously we know that this year we had to do some hard work on the budget to ensure that we had a balanced budget, more so a budget that had some reserve or excess. And so this year, I would not advocate for the engagement of another staff person. The reason I picked 2021 to begin the conversation is that we'll have the results from the census by then, and we'll know how much we're going to increase, at least in terms of the pool tax with the new residents that have moved into Wildwood over the past 10 years. And maybe in 2022, with that bump in population, increase in sales tax, and our kind of harder looks at the budget each year, maybe that'll be an opportunity then to take up staff. So thank you.
Joe, I like the item number 1 where you said engage the use of the county problem properties unit. And I think if perhaps they could come out and you guys could have some kind of discussion with your team of code enforcement individuals and put together a priority list of this is where we need that backup the most. These are the types of situations that we need to call them in and utilize them in those situations so that you guys aren't going, well, do I do it or do I not? I want you all to feel comfortable enough to do your job, but when you feel yourself and or a resident might be at risk, then let's involve a unit of St. Louis County that will assist us in that process so that you guys don't have to carry that whole burden. So I would put that on a higher priority out of the others, just because, yes, it will require a little bit of planning time on the department's part, but perhaps that will ease some of the burden, and then you can look at how do we deal with the other issues that we have to do code enforcement on, since we have some additional resources that we can bring to bear.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't need to push you on this question, but
Sure.
Do you need more staff? And I understand, I appreciate your thoughtfulness about waiting for the budget and it's after the census. I just feel like if you do need it now, we'll find the money, because that's way more important than waiting 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm sure you could ask the 10 staff members, including myself in the Department of Planning and Parks, and you might get different answers or a consistent answer. I appreciate the consideration, and maybe that's what I'd like to do, is talk with our city administrator, talk with our code enforcement officers and the others in the department, and see what they all think. Make it not just necessarily what I believe or don't believe is appropriate. So thank you. And if, with the permission of the committee, that's something we can do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's a good idea, and I think we should follow it. Mm-hmm. Don?
Thank you. I can see how this conversation kind of bleeds a little bit into our previous one, kind of enforcement and that. So I think we need to be careful here. I read Mr. Irvine yesterday, correct? Yeah, I read his email,
Yes, sir.
and that was quite a book. But I thought he was a little unfair. Not knowing even all the facts myself, I thought he was a little unfair to your department, because I just have confidence in you and your department to do the best that they can. But just kind of looking at your recommendations and kind of reading a little bit of this, it's almost like we're kind of admitting we don't need anything necessarily new. We just need to kind of enforce what we have. We run with that at my work, we don't need a new policy. We just need to obey the policy we have, and we'd be okay. And we wouldn't, if we'd have done that, we wouldn't be in the situation we're in, so that's, like a personal thing, I guess. But the county's problem properties unit, how often do we use them now?
I would say in a quarter, maybe once or twice a quarter. So very seldom. And that's, I think, more a reflection on the community, in that we don't have those systemic problems as many other communities have. But maybe it's because again, we have a highly educated population, a more, obviously, an upper middle class population. And for the most part, it's a newer community as well. Even though we are getting to that point where some of the housing is at that 30 to 40-year-old mark, a lot of it is still newer housing. And we don't see a lot of the problems of property maintenance as other communities. So, and that's my impression, is that, there's factors here that make it a little bit better and allow us to have more flexibility.
Sure. This team of 3 that they have, that the county has, how many teams of 3 are there?
Well, I don't know. That's a good question. We get the same 3 gentlemen for the most part when we call. Do you remember when you were captain how many?
Okay, so, and if you would call them today and need their help with something, what's their response time?
It has been the next day.
Okay, so that all being said, and I'm not trying to put you on the spot here or anything, I mean, if we have that resource available to us now, why just aren't we using it more?
Well, there is that portion where we relinquish a certain amount of control. So meaning that they make the decision on what the enforcement process will be. And sometimes we may not agree. We know certain circumstances they may not, because they haven't asked the right questions and we haven't given them the appropriate answers. And for the most part, I guess it relates back to the 3 of us as code enforcement officers. You pay us to do the work. We try to do the work the best we can. But there are certain times we just know we're not skilled enough in this area to address the problem appropriately. We could certainly write them a warning notice, write them a summons, but that's not going to solve the problem. It goes much deeper. And those are the times we really know that problem properties is the best approach.
Joe, do you see, like, sometimes with, you have this problem, it's just, I'm going to pick on Kathy, she's just this, horrible landowner and whatever like that, but Joe just keeps coming out and, oh, I know Joe and blah, blah, blah. So if they send 3 other people out, I mean, does the county's problem properties unit, can they be more effective, because it's not necessarily a community thing and it's not a neighbor or local thing?
I think they are, because obviously there's an officer there that's been trained to address problem properties, whether it's the individual or the situation or both. And we bring solutions as well, a building inspector and a social worker. And they are the ones that basically say, well, I know a way to make this work, and there's these services out there that can help you. It may just be as simple as they know of a church group that wants to volunteer and help people do repairs to their home. They have a network out there that they've formulated over time through their efforts that we don't. And that's also when we depend on them. We have a situation in Wildwood where one of our officers, one of our NPOs, neighborhood policing officers, has been able to access a church group, and it's through the problem properties unit of St. Louis County that's come out and helped to clean up a lot, do some minor repairs on their home. So that's really the benefit too. They bring with them a lot of other people that they've worked with previously.
Okay. And, I'm all for that. And if it's, I'm sure you're using your best discretion, and I would probably be no different than yourself. I'm getting paid to do something. I want to do it the best I can before I, call in help. But, are you looking for a motion to move forward with these 4? Or are you just kind of letting us know what your thoughts are and what your kind of like the new game plan, or?
I wasn't necessarily seeking a motion tonight. I wanted to introduce the topic to you. It's timely based upon what happened last night at public participation at City Council. I think I want to do there's been some suggestions made, and I think I'd like to investigate those before I ask for maybe a more formal direction.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I trust your judgment to move forward, but if there are resources out there that can help you and do your job better and help our residents, I'm all for you taking advantage and using those resources.
Thank you.
And I think one of the most important aspects of this is we need to be able to enforce our codes. And I think working with the state legislator through the municipal league is an excellent idea, because until our codes have some teeth and we can actually enforce them and we can levy fines, there are going to be some people that are just going to go, okay, thank you, and do as they please. So what do you need from us in order to be able to go down that avenue?
Well, as I just mentioned to Mr. Bartoni, I'd like to do a little more research on the staffing question. I'd like to get you some more information on the problems properties unit so you can understand what that entails. And then certainly, you've asked, I also, the one thing I'd failed to put in the memorandum that struck me over the weekend is just, I don't know, so I would assume you don't know how many calls for service we get per year. Maybe that'd be an interesting thing for you to understand. And maybe that'll put it in the context of staffing as well.
How many miles you all drive.
Yeah.
I can only imagine.
Well, I would like to say that I know when we have code issues in Ward 5, you are very responsive and do it in a very timely manner. So thank you for that. Katie?
I don't remember what I was. Oh, I do now. The conversation we had in public speaking last night, is somebody from the department going to follow up with that particular individual regarding code enforcement? Okay. Yes,
Mr. Irvine and I have probably met the last 3 weeks, once a week. Mr. Anselm, our city administrator, and I met with both of the neighbors. I've reached out to the other neighbor, the one that's caused the issues for the other two. I've done it through email, so there's a record of what's been said and not said. And I intend to have a conversation with him this week, because I am preparing another letter, just kind of summarizing all the things I've seen out there that I think need to be addressed based upon our codes, and want to talk with him about how much time he needs to make that happen. He built that outbuilding. The building's a pretty good sized outbuilding by most standards, but I'm told from the neighbors it's full, and that's why a lot of the items are out on in the yard area. So here again, it may be an issue that we just need to work a little closer with the property owner, and not necessarily just depend on notices and summonses, but eventually we've got to get compliance. I understand that.
I just didn't know whether you had, based on your statement from the current laws that we have available to us, if you had the teeth you need to make that happen.
I'd like to believe that the neighbor that has created the issues for the other two, he's worked with our other code enforcement officers. As I say, it seems like we kind of then slip back into it. So I like to think we're going to get compliance, and maybe the solution is something we haven't thought of yet. And maybe just a conversation with him and I, we can figure that out.
It's just a question real quick. I don't know the answer. So the staffing and budget, just a question to you. The fees that we charge, doesn't that go to your department? Could we increase that to maybe help offset some of that, because it deals with permitting? And I don't know the last time we updated that. And I think that we're pretty cheap compared to other permits that I apply for at county. So it's just an idea to help offset the budget. Have we looked at that before?
We could certainly raise it, because it's zero right now.
And we could charge.
Yes, even a nominal fee would be much more than we're collecting at the moment.
I think maybe we'll put that on the agenda.
So thank you for your comments and suggestions, and we'll do a little research internally and talk with the problem properties unit that works out here, and we'll get you more information about them as well. So thank you.
Our next item of business is renaming of the Pond Grover Loop Road.
Thank you again, Madam Chair. Madam Chair and members of the committee, as you know, many years ago, St. Louis County had an elaborate plan for the intersection of State Route 100 and State Route 109. That was to be a major commercial node, and around it would be a loop collector roadway system. So if you wanted to envision it in your mind, think of Chesterfield Parkway. For all intents and purposes, that was the intent, to replicate here what is at Olive Street Road, Clarkson Road, and Highway 40. As you know, the loop road is no longer going to be a loop. And so there's been discussions both at Administration and Public Works Committee and now here at Planning and Parks regarding renaming the Pond Grover Loop Road. At our last meeting, I believe one of the committee members, I don't remember exactly, said, what about Pond Grover Parkway? And so Mr. Cruz contacted the Office of Emergency Management with St. Louis County, offered that name, Pond Grover Parkway, and they fell in love with it. It's perfect for them. And so they've actually went ahead and already assigned an address to our new Ward 5 Park, Green Pines Park, and to the pavilion down in Community Park. And as you can see, they were very excited about getting that resolved for us. So tonight we are presenting the name Pond Grover Parkway. Certainly if it's not acceptable to the committee, we can go back to the Office of Emergency Management and address a different name there. But it seems to work, and it was your all's suggestion. So congratulations.
Ken?
Can I make a motion to accept the name as is?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? Motion passes.
And my thanks to Mr. Cruz for working with them. He asked them a lot of questions to get to this final point. Yeah. Yep. I understand. Bigger isn't always better.
Our next item is revised landscaping plan for the John L. Cave Memorial Trailhead.
Again, thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair and members of the committee, as you'll recall at our last city council meeting, not one this past Monday, but before that, 2 weeks ago Monday, Councilmember Edens identified burning bushes as a main planting component at the new John L. Cave Memorial Trailhead. It was an error on the part of the department. I apologize, but certainly once it was identified, we started working on solutions. We got back with the landscape architect that prepared the original landscape plan, advised him of the concerns regarding burning bushes, and the landscape architect recommended a different type, very similar in terms of its hardiness and color during the spring, summer, and fall. Chokeberries, and so chokeberries have been used to replace the burning bushes. Councilmember Brost, who represents Ward 1, where the trailhead is located, also had a suggestion about maybe asking the LeCaves if there were any kind of special plantings his father liked or his father and mother liked. And there were weeping willows and black-eyed Susan. And so Mr. Brost suggested, and the department thought it was an appropriate suggestion, that maybe we find a location for a couple of weeping willows and use some black-eyed Susan in the park. And we were able to do that. And this new revised landscape plan reflects that. And Mr. LeCave, the son of John L. LeCave, sent me an email saying he thought it was great. And Mr. Brost also emailed the department and saying if Mr. LeCave was fine, he was fine. So tonight the department is presenting the revised plan to the committee for action. If the committee's action is favorable, we'll get with the levy district and the Corps of Engineers to make sure everything's okay with the revised plan. And if so, you'll see it back at City Council for action.
I'll just make the motion that we move forward with the department's recommendation.
The next item is the preliminary sign designs for the John L. LeCave Memorial Trailhead.
And following up with the landscape plan, the final improvement we'd like to do to complete the John LeCave Memorial Trailhead is park signage. So we're hoping to do an entry monument sign and an interpretive sign that explains why the park is named what it is, and give a little history on Mr. LeCave. So the department has been working on this over the past few months. We hired the designery to present a sign package and give us some options. They came up with some beautiful options. The LeCave family made their selection. We asked for pricing. It was $40,000 for the two signs. So the department did not believe that that was very fiscally appropriate, nor is it in the budget that we have left. So we went back to the drawing board and worked to revise the monument sign to what you see, which is the angled sign, and then the interpretive sign. We modified some of the posts, the decorative posts on that as well. We got the price down, cut in half. Basically, we were still slightly over budget, and also looking at some ways to modify that as well. We're doing our best to get it within budget and still retain the beauty of and the look that we're going for on the sign. So we've removed the stone base on the monument sign, but you'll note if you've been out there, the iron, the steel plates all match the gates as well. So we're really keeping the look in the same. So what we normally do when we run into a roadblock is we call Glenn Gailey, who is the parks contractor, and we showed him the plans and said, help. So Mr. Gailey has already drawn up and got some pricing and believes that he can do the installation of the decorative posts next to the interpretive sign, as well as all of the supports on the monument sign, and get us back within budget. So we have gotten a revised bid, which is presented before you all this evening from the designery. So they will manufacture the sign itself and the hanging supports, and then they will do the interpretive sign minus the decorative pillars. And then we'll rely on Mr. Gailey, who's already under contract with the city and with the department, to finish out the wood framing and the additional metal pieces that need to happen. So there's about $16,000 once we spend about $10,500 on the landscaping. There's still $16,000 budgeted this year that can go to the signing and signage, and you can see that the designery's bid is now down to less than 10. So we have about $6,000 with some change wiggle room for Mr. Gailey, which shouldn't be a problem. So the department is presenting these and seeking some input on the proposed signage to finish out the LeCave Trailhead.
I'd like to make a motion that we move forward with the recommendations of the department.
I'll second it, but I have a comment or a question for Kathy.
The LeCaves also, have reviewed the signage or in support. And the interpretive sign text, we actually drafted based on a presentation that Duddy LeCave gave to you all, and all 4 of the LeCave children have approved that as well. Sorry, Councilmember Bartoni, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, that's okay. So the sign on the left, that's gonna not change. That's what we're.
It's minus the stone base.
Minus the stone base. So yes. The columns or the wood just going to go all the way down.
Yes.
Okay.
And it may be 8 inches versus 10 on the 2 uprights. There's a significant cost difference in a 10-inch post and an 8-inch post. But they're showing 8-inch on the angled support, and they've shown 2 varieties of a 10-inch and an 8-inch. So it'll probably be the 8-inch upright.
Okay, and then the one on the right, what are the differences going to be on that one? Or is that?
There won't be. There'll be the 8-inch post, but we'll still have the decorative steel plates to match the gate at the trail itself.
Okay.
And the interpretive sign will be, it's two front steel supports and then a 45-degree angled sign. That's the part that'll be manufactured by the designery, and Mr. Gately will take care of the decorative wooden posts on either side.
Okay, thank you.
Good job.
Oh, thank you.
That was well presented, and thank you for looking at that and finding ways to, I guess, still make it look real classy and presentable and for the restricted budget. So your department did a great job, so thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
I just have one other comment, and this is, so, like, when do you think it'll be done?
That's a very good question.
And I'm not putting your feet to the fire, but
Yeah.
I know that this predates me.
Yes.
Like, how long has this been in the plans?
Well, Mr. LeCave was killed 21 years ago.
Okay, wow.
Yeah.
Can we have the family here when we, like, would it be appropriate to have them here when we bring this to council for a final vote, or would they not want to do? I mean, I don't want to also make them uncomfortable, but
I don't think they'd be uncomfortable. I think they're the kindest people. They've never once said, "What took you so long?" Which I think Joe and I think often to ourselves, "What has taken us so long?" But they, we're in constant contact with. Duddy is kind of the spokesperson for the family, but several of them are local, so I think we'd be happy to extend that invitation. And I'm like, literally, they just love everything we do down there, and this will be as quickly as we can get the last two items done. I think.
Yeah, without anybody's objection, I would think that would be kind of nice to have them there. So.
Yes, ma'am. If there are any questions regarding the maintenance revenues, expenditures, or the action plan update, I have two experts here that can answer them.
I have one very important comment on maintenance reservation that I always call your attention to in January. We're in the plus column.
I saw that. Good job.
Thank you. It won't be the same. Don't ask me next month to make any presentation on it. We'll hide in January.
Are there any other matters for consideration? Ken?
Just one. And maybe I can put this on the agenda for next meeting. I'll send an email and request this. But in my short tenure on this committee and in this city, I think one of the most amazing things about this city, quite frankly, is you guys. I've never seen such talented people work in a city and do as much work as you guys do, and do it with a smile. And so I don't know, there's probably no way that the city is going to pay back each of you for doing as hard work as you guys do. But I will say this, we've got a number of parks. I would really like to see if we could put something forward to have a large tree planting with a plaque with each of our city employees' names on for this year, to demonstrate our appreciation for the fantastic work that they do. I mean, I don't know anybody like a Kathy, a Joe, a Gary. I would hire you if you could do research in my lab any day of the week. Because you're just amazing. Probably might. I didn't say the hospital or the ICU, but I just want to say that I really think I'd like to add something to the agenda, to do something to really recognize our wonderful 21 employees.
I think that's a great idea, and please add that to our agenda for next time. I totally agree, and I think planting a tree in one or more of our parks is an excellent idea, because that's what they do.
And we could plant 21 trees and have a plaque in front. I'm okay with that too.
And, we can put them in the Green Pines Park.
Yeah, the Kathy tree, the Joe tree.
Got a lot of unused
That's Mike the crab tree. We're gonna have a problem.
Any other comments, Crystal?
So that intrigued me about the permit thing. Do we need to put that on an agenda to look at legislation to maybe look at charging for permits? I mean, we're in a budget crisis. If there's a way to make money, I mean, we're silly for not doing it.
I actually think the city administrator is reviewing all the fees because many of them have not been adjusted since 1995. We still charge the same amount for Board of Adjustment and our zoning application processes as we did the day we incorporated. So I know Mr. Anselm is looking at that, and I think Administration Public Works Committee is actually charged with that responsibility.
I'd just
I'll
like to see
verify
move.
that, and if I'm incorrect, I'll let you all know.
Okay.
In talking with Joe Garantano, he said that that's moved up on their priority list. So Sam's working to do the background information and comparisons to other cities. And then we'll hopefully have something within the next month or two.
Any other
council.
discussion? Thank you all for a very good meeting this evening, very productive, and meeting is adjourned.